Captain Elena Rodriguez stood on the bridge of the UES Prometheus, watching the stars drift past through the massive viewing screen. The ship was huge, bigger than anything the aliens had ever built. It carried 5,000 humans, and enough weapons to destroy a small moon. Around it, 11 other human ships moved through space like hunting wolves. Elena had been born on Mars, in the deep colonies where the air was thin and the gravity was weak. Like all humans, she had grown up, strong. Her bones were dense, her muscles were powerful, and her mind was sharp. The other species in the galaxy called humans Deathworlders because they came from Earth, a planet so dangerous that most aliens would die just from breathing the air. The bridge was quiet, except for the soft hum of computers. Elena's crew worked, at their stations, checking weapons, watching for threats, and keeping the ship running. These were good people, tough people who had seen war and survived. They trusted each other with their lives. Lieutenant Sarah Kim looked up from her station. She was the ship's alien language expert, one of the few humans who could speak more than 20 different alien languages. Her job was to listen to alien communications and figure out what they meant. "Captain," Sarah said, her voice tense. "I'm getting something strange. It's a distress signal, but it's not from any human ship." Elena walked over to Sarah's station. On the screen, waves of sound moved up and down in patterns that looked almost like music. But Elena could hear fear in those sounds, even though she didn't understand the words. "Can you translate it?" Elena asked. Sarah's fingers moved quickly, over her keyboard. The computer tried to match the sounds with known languages. After a few minutes, words appeared on the screen. The translation was rough, but the message was clear. "Help us, please help us, the hegemony has come. Our worlds are burning, our children are dying. We know you are the Deathworlders. We know you are dangerous, but we have nowhere else to turn. Please, if you have any mercy, help us." Elena read the message twice. She had heard of the hegemony before. They were a big empire that conquered other worlds and made slaves of the people who lived there. They had been growing stronger for years, taking over planet after planet. But they had never bothered humans before. "Who sent this?" Elena asked. "The Zephyrian Republic," Sarah replied. "They're traders and doctors. Good people from what I've heard. They've never hurt anyone." Elena nodded. She knew about the Zephyrians. They made medicines that could cure diseases no human doctor had ever seen. They were peaceful, gentle people who believed in helping others. The idea of the hegemony attacking them made Elena's blood boil. She pressed a button on her chair. "Admiral, Chen to the bridge immediately." Admiral Marcus Chen arrived 5 minutes later. He was an older man with gray hair and scars on his hands from old battles. He had been fighting for humanity for 30 years, and he knew war better than anyone on the ship. Elena showed him the message. The Admiral read it slowly, his face getting darker with each word. "How far away are they?" he asked. 3 weeks, at maximum speed," Sarah answered. "But Admiral, the message is 12 hours old. If the hegemony is really attacking them, they might already be dead," the Admiral finished. He was quiet for a long moment, thinking. Then he pressed his own button. "All senior officers to conference room 1 now." 20 minutes later, the ship's top officers sat around a long metal table. There was Commander Hassan al-Rashid, the chief engineer who kept the ship's powerful engines running. There was Dr. Maria Santos, the head doctor who saved lives when battles went wrong. There was Colonel James Wright, who led the Marines when they had to fight on planets instead of in space. Admiral Chen played the Zephyrian message for everyone. When it ended, the room was silent. "The hegemony has never attacked us directly," the Admiral said. "We could ignore this. We could say it's not our problem." "But?" Elena asked, because she could hear there was a but coming. "But these are good people asking for help, and the hegemony won't stop with the Zephyrians. They'll keep growing until they're strong enough to come after us." Colonel Wright leaned forward. "How many ships do they have?" "Intelligence says about 600 in their main fleet," the Admiral replied. "We have 12. The numbers were terrible. Even human ships were tough. 600 against 12 was impossible odds. But Elena had seen humans do impossible things. Before Dr. Santos spoke up. "What about the civilians? How many Zephyrians are we talking about?" Sarah checked her computer. "About 15 billion across 17 worlds." The room went quiet again. 15 billion lives. Elena tried to imagine that many people, but the number was too big. It was like trying to count the stars. "We can't save them all," Commander al-Rashid said. Even if we could beat the hegemony fleet, which we probably can't, we don't have enough ships to evacuate that many people. Elena stood up. She walked to the big window that looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, alien children were probably crying while their homes burned. Somewhere out there, good people were dying while bad people got stronger. We can't save them all, she said. But we can make the hegemony pay for what they're doing. Admiral Chen smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the kind of smile a shark might have right before it attacked. That's what I was hoping you'd say. All in favor of responding to the distress call? Every hand in the room went up. There was no discussion, no argument. These were humans, and humans protected people who couldn't protect themselves. The Admiral stood up. Commander Al-Rashid, I want maximum speed to the Zephyrian system. Push the engines as hard as they'll go. If they break, fix them. If they catch fire, put them out and push them harder. Hassan grinned. You want to get there in 3 weeks, Admiral? No, the Admiral said. I want to get there in 1 week. The Zephyrians asked for help from Deathworlders. Let's show them what that means. As the officers left the room to prepare their ship for war, Elena looked out at the stars again. She thought about her home on Mars, about the colonies where humans lived and worked and raised their children. She thought about the Zephyrians she had never met, dying on worlds she had never seen. The hegemony had made a mistake. They had hurt innocent people, and now they were going to learn why the galaxy called humans the most dangerous species in known space. Elena pressed her comm button. All hands, this is the captain. We have received a distress call from the Zephyrian Republic. They are under attack by the Hegemony Empire. We are going to help them. She paused, looking out at the other human ships flying beside them. I won't lie to you. The odds are bad. We're outnumbered 50 to 1. A lot of us probably won't be coming home. But these are good people who need our help, and we're the only ones who can give it to them. Another pause. Elena could imagine her crew at their stations listening to her words and making their own choices. If anyone wants to transfer to a supply ship and head home, now is the time. No one will think less of you. This isn't your war. The comm system stayed quiet. No one asked to leave. Elena smiled. These were her people. Tough, stubborn, dangerous people who would rather die fighting than live knowing they could have helped someone and chose not to. All right then, she said. Let's go save some aliens. The human fleet changed course, heading toward a war they couldn't win and didn't care. They were Deathworlders, and Deathworlders never backed down from a fight. The human ships pushed through space faster than they had ever gone before. Commander Hassan al-Rashid had torn apart the safety systems on the engines and was forcing them to burn fuel at rates that should have blown up the ships. The fusion reactors screamed with power and the metal walls groaned under the stress. Elena could feel the acceleration pushing her into her chair. Her bones ached, her vision blurred, and her heart had to work twice as hard to pump blood through her body. Around her, the bridge crew looked like they were in pain, but no one complained. This was what humans did. They pushed harder when things got difficult. Status report, Elena said, her voice tight from the pressure. We're at 140% of maximum safe speed, Hassan reported from the engine room. The fusion cores are running hot, but they're holding together. Hull stress is in the yellow zone, but we're still okay. Elena nodded. Any other species would have been dead by now from the acceleration alone. Alien bodies were too fragile for this kind of punishment, but humans had evolved on a world where everything tried to kill them, and their bodies were built to survive. How long until we reach the Zephyrian system? She asked. At this rate, 8 days, Hassan replied. Assuming nothing explodes. 8 days instead of 3 weeks. It was still too long, but it was the best they could do. Elena tried not to think about what might be happening to the Zephyrians while the human fleet raced through space. In the ship's computer center, the artificial intelligence called Aegis was working on a different problem. Aegis was smarter than any human, faster than any human computer, and completely loyal to the human species. It had been built to help humans win wars, and that's what it was trying to do now. The AI studied everything it could find about the hegemony. Their ships, their weapons, their tactics, their history. The data wasn't good. The hegemony had conquered 47 different worlds and had never lost a major battle. They had more ships, bigger guns, and stronger shields than the humans did. But Aegis noticed something interesting in the historical data. Every species the hegemony had fought had surrendered when their losses reached about 15 to 20%. The hegemony was used to enemies who gave up when the fighting got too hard. Aegis ran the numbers on human behavior. In the Battle of New Beijing, humans had kept fighting with 70% casualties. In the Mars Colony War, human defenders had fought until only 3% were left alive. In every major human conflict, people had kept fighting long, after any reasonable person would have quit. The AI sent its analysis to Admiral Chen. The message was simple. The hegemony expects their enemies to surrender. Humans do not surrender, this may be enough. On the medical deck, Dr. Maria Santos was preparing for casualties. She had ordered extra blood supplies, more surgical equipment, and additional painkillers. But she knew that wouldn't be enough. In a battle against 600 enemy ships, a lot of humans were going to die. She was checking her supply lists when Sarah Kim came to see her. The language expert looked worried. "Doctor, I've been listening to more Zephyrian transmissions," Sarah said. "The situation is worse than we thought." Maria looked up from her computer. "How much worse?" Sarah handed her a data pad with the latest translations. Maria read the messages, and her face went pale. The hegemony wasn't just attacking military targets. They were bombing hospitals, schools, and civilian shelters. They were killing everyone they could find. 15 billion people, Sarah said quietly. "And we're 8 days away." Maria put down the datapad and looked out the small window in her office. Space looked peaceful from here, just stars and darkness. But somewhere out there, people were dying while she sat in safety. "We'll get there," she said. "And when we do, we'll make them pay." In another part of the ship, Colonel James Wright was training his Marines for ground combat. The men and women under his command were the toughest fighters humanity had ever produced. They could survive in environments that would kill most aliens in minutes. They could fight for days without rest, and they never gave up. But even they had limits. "Listen up," Wright told his troops. "We're going to be fighting an enemy that outnumbers us by a lot. They have better technology and more ships. The only advantages we have are that we're meaner, tougher, and more stubborn than they are." One of the Marines raised her hand. "Colonel, what do we know about hegemony ground troops?" Wright smiled grimly. "They're used to fighting enemies who surrender when things get hard. They use energy weapons that work well against shields but aren't great against armor. Most importantly, they've never fought humans before." He pressed a button and a hologram appeared showing a typical hegemony soldier. It was tall and thin, with 4 arms and smooth gray skin. It looked strong, but not as strong as a human. "They breathe a gas mixture that's poisonous to us, and we breathe air that's poisonous to them," Wright continued. "They're stronger than most species, but not stronger than us. They're trained well, but they've never fought an enemy that considers dying in battle an honor instead of a tragedy." The Marines nodded. These were people who had volunteered for the most dangerous job in the human military. They weren't afraid of death, especially not if their deaths meant that innocent people would live. Back on the bridge, Elena was studying star charts with Admiral Chen. They were trying to figure out the best way to attack a fleet that was 50 times larger than their own. "The hegemony uses standard formation tactics," the Admiral said. "Big ships in the center, smaller ships on the outside, support vessels in the back. It works well against enemies who fight the same way." Elena looked at the tactical display. "But we don't fight the same way." "No, we don't. We fight like pirates and terrorists and desperate people with nothing to lose. We hit hard, we hit fast, and we don't care about fair fights." The Admiral zoomed in on the Zephyrian home system. "If I were the hegemony commander, I'd park the main fleet here around the biggest planet. Use it as a base while I systematically destroyed the other worlds." "And if you were us?" Admiral Chen's smile was cold. "I'd come out of hyperspace right in the middle of their formation and start shooting immediately. No warnings, no demands. For surrender, no mercy. Just violence." Elena nodded. It wasn't the kind of warfare that civilized species practiced, but humans weren't civilized. They were survivors from a world where everything had tried to kill them for millions of years. They knew how to be brutal when brutality was necessary. "Sir?" Sarah's voice came over the comm system. "I'm getting another transmission from the Zephyrian system." "Put it through," Elena said. The message was harder to understand this time. There was a lot of static, and the alien voice sounded weak and scared. But Sarah's translation was clear enough. "They're bombing the evacuation ships," Sarah said, her voice shaking with anger. "The hegemony is targeting civilian transports, trying to escape. They're killing refugees." Elena felt something cold and hard settle in her chest. She had seen a lot of evil in her life, but this was different. This was murder for the sake of murder. This was cruelty without purpose. "New plan," she said to the Admiral. When we get there, we don't ask them to surrender, we don't give them a chance to explain, we just kill them all. Admiral Chen nodded. Agreed. Send a message to all ships. Rules of engagement are now shoot on sight. Any hegemony vessel in the Zephyrian system is a valid target. Elena looked around the bridge at her crew. These people had families back home. They had lives and dreams and futures. She was asking them to throw all of that away for the sake of aliens they had never met. But she saw no hesitation in their eyes. These were humans, and humans protected the innocent, even if it killed them. 6 more days, she announced to the ship. 6 more days, and we show the galaxy what happens when you hurt people under human protection. The human fleet continued its impossible journey through space, pushing their ships and themselves beyond all reasonable limits. Behind them, they left a trail of superheated gas and electromagnetic radiation. Ahead of them, they carried the promise of violence that would reshape the galaxy forever. The hegemony had made a mistake. They had killed innocents and thought no one would care enough to stop them. Soon, they would learn that when humans cared about something, they cared with the force of a dying star, and they were about to care very, very much. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace 8 days later, right in the middle of the largest space battle the galaxy had ever seen. Elena's first view of the Zephyrian system made her sick to her stomach. 17 planets hung in space like broken toys, their surfaces glowing red with fires. Debris from destroyed ships floated everywhere, and the vacuum was full of bodies. 600 hegemony warships filled the space around the main planet. They were huge, ugly things that looked like metal spears covered in weapon ports. They moved slowly and carefully like they had all the time in the world. And why shouldn't they? They were winning. The last of the Zephyrian defense platforms were dying as Elena watched. She could see the small, desperate alien ships trying to protect civilian transports, but they didn't have a chance. The hegemony vessels were too big, too strong, and too many. Admiral, Elena said into her comm system, we have visual on the target area. What's the situation? Admiral Chen's voice came back. Elena looked at the tactical display. The numbers were even worse than they had expected. 612 enemy vessels, sir. They're spread out around the main planet. No sign of organized resistance. The Zephyrian fleet is gone. There was silence on the comm channel for a moment. Then the Admiral's voice came back, cold and hard. All ships, this is Admiral Chen. We are now in combat. Rules of engagement. Our weapons free. Target any hegemony vessel. Show no mercy, expect no quarter. Make them pay for what they've done here. Elena turned to her weapons officer. Lieutenant Park, warm up all guns, target the closest enemy ship. Lieutenant David Park grinned as his hands moved over the weapon controls. The human ships might be smaller than the hegemony vessels, but they carried weapons that no other species would dare to use. Railguns that fired metal slugs at 15% of light speed. Nuclear missiles that could crack planets. Particle beams that could melt through the strongest armor. Guns are hot, Captain. Target locked. Elena looked at the main display one more time. The hegemony ships were still moving slowly, probably trying to figure out what these 12 new contacts were. They had no idea what was about to happen to them. Fire. The UES Prometheus spoke with a voice of thunder and lightning. Its main railgun sent a piece of metal the size of a car screaming through space at impossible speed. The projectile hit the hegemony destroyer exactly in the center, punching through its shields like they weren't even there. The enemy ship exploded in a ball of fire and gas. All around the human fleet, the other ships were firing too. 12 small vessels against 600 large ones, but the humans struck first and struck hard. In the first 10 seconds of combat, 15 hegemony ships died. The enemy fleet needed almost a full minute to realize they were under attack. Elena could imagine the confusion on their bridges as their sensors tried to make sense of what was happening. These new ships were so small, their weapons were so primitive, but somehow they were cutting through the hegemony formation like sharks through a school of fish. Then the aliens started to react. The huge ships began turning toward the humans, their own weapons charging up. Energy shields flickered to life and plasma cannons prepared to fire. The hegemony might have been surprised, but they were still professionals. Elena's comm system crackled with an alien voice speaking in the hegemony language. Sarah Kim quickly translated it. They're demanding to know who we are, Sarah said. They want us to identify ourselves and surrender immediately. Elena laughed. It wasn't a nice sound. Tell them we're humans from Earth. Tell them we don't surrender. Sarah sent the message, and a few seconds later another alien voice came back. This one sounded different, more important. Sarah's translation made Elena smile grimly. That's their fleet commander, Sarah said. Overlord Thax. He says humans are primitive Deathworlders who should know their place. He's ordering us to retreat, or be destroyed. Send him a message back, Elena said. Tell him we have a better idea. The hegemony fleet was starting to move now, trying to form up into their standard battle formation. But the humans weren't fighting a standard battle. They were fighting like wild animals, attacking from all sides at once, hitting hard and moving fast. The UES Prometheus rolled to avoid a plasma beam that would have cut it in half, then fired its entire missile battery at a hegemony cruiser. The nuclear warheads hit the alien ship's shields and overloaded them, allowing the follow-up railgun shots to penetrate the hull. Another enemy ship died, but the humans were taking hits too. Elena watched as the UES Shanghai took a direct hit from a hegemony battleship's main gun. The human ship's armor cracked and atmosphere began venting into space. But the Shanghai didn't retreat or surrender. Instead, it accelerated toward the ship that had hurt it, firing everything it had. Shanghai is ramming, someone shouted over the comm system. Elena watched in horror and pride as the human ship smashed into the hegemony battleship at full speed. Both vessels exploded in a flash of light that lit up half the solar system. 2,000 humans died in that collision, but they took 8,000 aliens with them. The battle continued for hours. The humans moved through the hegemony formation like ghosts, appearing suddenly to destroy an enemy ship, then vanishing before the aliens could retaliate effectively. They used tactics that no civilized species would consider, ramming damaged ships into enemy vessels, setting up nuclear mines in the paths of alien formations, even sending boarding parties to capture enemy ships from the inside. Elena's ship shuddered as another plasma beam scraped along its hull. The lights flickered and she could smell smoke from damaged systems. But the Prometheus kept fighting, its guns never stopping, its crew never giving up. Hull breach on Deck 7, someone reported. Emergency teams are responding. Elena nodded but didn't take her eyes off the tactical display. The human fleet was down to 9 ships now, but they had destroyed almost 200 hegemony vessels. The odds were getting better, but they were still impossible. Then something changed. Elena noticed it first in the way the enemy ships were moving. They were being more careful now, staying farther away from the humans, taking longer to line up their shots. The hegemony crews were starting to get scared. Admiral, she called over the comm. I think they're rattled. They're not pressing their attacks as hard as they were. Admiral Chen's voice came back, strained but determined. Good. They're used to enemies who give up when the fighting gets hard. They don't know what to do when someone fights back harder. The battle continued, but now Elena could see fear in the alien formations. Ships that should have been advancing were holding back. Captains who should have been aggressive were playing it safe. The hegemony fleet was bigger and stronger, but they were fighting an enemy that didn't care about odds or losses. Captain, Sarah Kim called out from her station. I'm picking up communications from the hegemony fleet. They're talking about retreating. Elena couldn't believe it. The aliens still outnumbered the humans 3-1 and they were thinking about running away. But then she looked at the battle display and understood. The humans hadn't just been killing hegemony ships, they had been terrorizing them. Every human attack had been more violent and desperate than the last. The aliens had never faced an enemy that fought like this. The end came suddenly. Overlord Thax's flagship, a massive dreadnought that was bigger than 3 human ships put together, found itself surrounded by the last 4 vessels of the human fleet. The aliens could have won that fight, should have won it easily. Instead, they ran. Elena watched in amazement as the hegemony fleet began jumping to hyperspace, not in an organized retreat, but in panic. Ships fled in all directions, abandoning their positions, leaving their dead behind. In less than an hour, the space around the Zephyrian homeworld was empty, except for human ships and floating debris. The comm system was quiet for a long moment. Then Admiral Chen's voice came through, tired but victorious. All ships, report status. One by one, the human captains checked in. 4 ships lost, 8 remaining. 12,000 humans dead, 38,000 still alive. Against impossible odds, they had won. Elena looked out at the Zephyrian planet below. The surface was still burning, but there were signs of life. Cities that were still intact, people who were still alive. The humans had arrived too late to save everyone, but they had saved someone. This is Admiral Chen to any Zephyrian vessels in the system. The Admiral broadcast on all frequencies. The hegemony fleet has been defeated. You are safe. We are here to help. The response came a few minutes later, in the musical language of the Zephyrians. Sarah Kim translated it, and her voice was full of emotion. They're saying thank you, Sarah said. They're saying they didn't think anyone would come. They're saying we're heroes. Elena wasn't sure about that. Heroes didn't usually win battles by being more vicious than their enemies. Heroes didn't ram ships into each other or plant nuclear mines. Heroes fought clean, noble fights. But maybe that was the problem with the rest of the galaxy. Maybe they were too civilized, too clean, too noble. Maybe sometimes the only way to stop a monster was to become something even more frightening. The human fleet settled into orbit around the Zephyrian homeworld, their weapons finally silent. They had answered an alien distress call and had paid for it with blood. The news of the human victory spread through hegemony space like wildfire. On worlds that had been conquered, slaves whispered about the Deathworlders who had defeated 600 ships with only 12. In the halls of power, hegemony leaders tried to understand how their seemingly invincible fleet had been crushed by such a small force. Overlord Thax sat in chains in his own throne room, waiting for execution. He had lost 400 ships and nearly 2 million crew members to an enemy he had dismissed as primitive. The High Command was not pleased. You failed us, Thax, said High Admiral Korth as she examined the battle reports. You allowed a handful of Deathworld savages to humiliate our entire fleet. Thax looked up from his chains. You don't understand. They don't fight like any other species we've encountered. They don't retreat when they're losing. They don't surrender when they're outnumbered. They keep fighting until they die, and they take as many of us with them as they can. Excuses, Korth replied. You had overwhelming numerical superiority. You should have crushed them. I tried. We all tried. But they... Thax paused, trying to find the words. They ram damaged ships into our vessels rather than try to save their crews. They plant nuclear weapons inside their own disabled ships and wait for us to come close. They board our vessels through breached hulls and fight room by room until every one of them is dead. Korth studied the tactical recordings from the battle. The human ships moved strangely, attacking in ways that made no tactical sense. They sacrificed themselves without hesitation, trading their own lives for maximum damage to the enemy. It was wasteful, inefficient, and terrifying. We need a new approach, she said finally. Traditional fleet tactics won't work against humans. She turned to her intelligence officer. What do we know about their psychology? The officer, a thin alien with multiple eyes, consulted his datapad. According to our sources, humans form strong emotional bonds with other beings, especially those they consider helpless or innocent. They have a pathological need to protect others even at the cost of their own lives. Korth smiled coldly. It wasn't a pleasant expression. Then we know how to hurt them. Meanwhile, in the Zephyrian system, the human fleet was helping with rescue operations. Elena walked through the medical bay of the Prometheus, watching human doctors work alongside Zephyrian healers to save lives. The aliens were strange-looking, creatures tall and graceful with smooth blue skin and large, intelligent eyes, but they worked well with the humans, sharing medical techniques and supplies. Dr. Maria Santos approached Elena, looking exhausted but satisfied. We've set up field hospitals on 6 different planets, she reported. The Zephyrians are teaching us about their medical technology, and we're sharing our trauma surgery techniques with them. Elena nodded. It was a good trade. The Zephyrians were masters of medicine and biological science, but they had never developed the kind of emergency surgery techniques that humans needed in war. The humans, on the other hand, knew more about fixing severe injuries than any other species in the galaxy. How bad are the casualties? Elena asked. Maria's expression darkened. 3 billion dead on the outer worlds. The hegemony didn't just attack military targets, they systematically destroyed anything that could support life. Hospitals, schools, water treatment plants, food production facilities. Elena felt the familiar cold anger settling in her chest. The hegemony hadn't been trying to conquer the Zephyrians, they had been trying to exterminate them. It was genocide, pure and simple. Captain Rodriguez, a soft voice said behind her. Elena turned to see a Zephyrian approaching. This one was older than the others she had met, with silver markings on his blue skin and a formal bearing that suggested importance. I am Chancellor Veth of the Zephyrian Republic, the alien said in careful English. I wanted to thank you personally for what your people have done. Elena felt uncomfortable with the gratitude. Yes, the humans had driven off the hegemony fleet, but they had arrived too late to save billions of innocent people. We should have come sooner, she said. Chancellor Veth's large eyes showed surprise. Sooner? Captain, you crossed half the galaxy in 8 days to help people you had never met. You fought against impossible odds and won. How could you have done more? Elena didn't have a good answer to that. Humans always felt like they should do more, save more, protect more. It was part of what made them dangerous and part of what made them human. What will you do now? She asked the Chancellor. Rebuild if we can. But... Veth hesitated. Captain, the hegemony will return. They have thousands of ships, millions of soldiers. This defeat will only make them angry. They will come back with a larger fleet and finish what they started. Elena was about to respond when her comm system chimed. It was Admiral Chen, and he sounded urgent. All senior officers, to the flag bridge immediately. We have a situation. Elena excused herself and hurried to the main command center of the fleet. When she arrived, she found the other surviving captains already assembled around a holographic display. Admiral Chen looked grim. We've intercepted a hegemony transmission, he said without preamble. Show them Lieutenant Kim. Sarah Kim activated. The hologram, which showed a recording of an alien communication. The translation appeared as text at the bottom of the display. This is High Admiral Korth of the Hegemony 4th Fleet. We have captured a human medical vessel that was providing aid to refugee populations in the Outer Rim. The crew is currently our guests. We invite the human fleet to witness their treatment. The recording changed to show the inside of a hegemony prison ship. Elena's blood turned to ice as she saw 20 human medical personnel chained to the walls. They had been beaten, but they were still alive. A hegemony officer appeared in the frame. Deathworlders, the alien said in broken English. You have interfered with hegemony operations. You have cost us ships and lives. Now you will pay. These humans will suffer for every ship you destroyed. They will scream for every life you took. And when we are finished with them, we will come for the rest of you. The recording ended. The flag bridge was silent for a long moment. How many ships does she have? Elena asked quietly. Long-range sensors show 1,500 vessels, Admiral Chen replied. 3 times the size of the fleet we just defeated. Elena looked around at her fellow captains. These were tough people who had seen the worst that war had to offer, but she could see fear in their eyes. Not fear of death, that was something humans could handle. Fear that they wouldn't be able to save their captured comrades. Sir, she said to the Admiral, what are your orders? Admiral Chen was quiet for a long moment, studying the tactical display. 1,500 ships against 8. Even worse odds than they had just faced. And this time the enemy had human. Hostages. The hegemony thinks they understand human psychology, he said finally. They think we'll negotiate or surrender to save our people. Won't we? Asked Captain Liu of the UES Beijing. The Admiral's expression was cold and hard. No. We won't negotiate with terrorists, and we won't surrender to murderers. But we will do something else. He turned to the assembled captains. I'm authorizing Directive Omega, total war against the hegemony empire. We're not just going to rescue our people, we're going to make sure the hegemony never threatens innocent civilians again. Elena had heard of Directive Omega, but had never seen it implemented. It was the human military's ultimate response to genocide and war crimes. It meant the complete destruction of an enemy's ability to make war, regardless of cost. Sir, she said carefully, Directive Omega means attacking civilian targets, supply depots, manufacturing centers, government facilities. Are we really prepared to do that? Admiral Chen looked at the recording of the tortured human medical staff one more time. The hegemony has shown us what kind of enemy they are. They target civilians, they torture prisoners, and they commit genocide for sport. I'm not going to play by civilized rules against an enemy that has no concept of civilization. He turned to address all the captains. Split the fleet into 3 task forces. Captain Rodriguez, you'll take the Beijing and the Mumbai to rescue our people. Captain Morrison, you take the Tokyo and the Sydney to hit their supply lines. I'll take the remaining ships and go straight for their capital. Elena nodded. It was a desperate plan, but it might work. The hegemony was expecting the humans to either surrender or come charging in with all their ships to attempt a rescue. They wouldn't expect the human fleet to split up and attack on multiple fronts. What about the Zephyrians? She asked. They're not fighters, the Admiral said. But they're excellent at medicine and logistics. Chancellor Veth has offered to support our operations with supply ships and medical facilities. We'll need both if this is going to work. As the meeting broke up and the captains returned to their ships, Elena thought about what they were about to do. They were going to war against an empire that controlled hundreds of worlds and commanded millions of soldiers. They were outnumbered by almost 200 to 1. But the hegemony had made a critical mistake. They had tortured humans under the protection of the human fleet. They had threatened to commit genocide against innocents. They had shown that they couldn't be reasoned with, negotiated with, or trusted. The human fleet split apart like a pack of wolves, each group heading toward different targets across hegemony space. Elena commanded 2 ships and 8,000 people in a desperate mission to rescue 20 captured humans from a prison fleet of 300 vessels. The odds were insane, but humans had never let impossible odds stop them before. Her task force moved through space like ghosts, using stealth technology that the hegemony had never seen before. Human ships were designed to fight. In the darkness between stars where sensor shadows and electronic warfare could hide them from enemies, it was a different kind of warfare than the stand-up fight they had waged over the Zephyrian worlds. "Contact," reported Lieutenant Park from the sensor station. 300 ships, just like the intelligence report said. They're spread out, in a defensive formation around a prison transport. Elena studied the tactical display. The hegemony commander was smart, keeping his valuable prisoner transport in the center of his fleet where it would be protected. But that also meant Elena knew exactly where her people were. "Can we get to them?" she asked. "Not directly," Park replied. "But there's a lot of debris in this system. Asteroids, old battle wreckage, gas clouds. If we're careful, we might be able to get close enough for a boarding action." Elena nodded. A boarding action against a ship surrounded by 300 enemy vessels was suicide, but sometimes suicide was the only option that worked. Meanwhile, Captain Morrison was leading his own small force against hegemony supply lines. His ships struck like lightning, appearing from hyperspace to destroy cargo vessels and supply depots, then vanishing before the enemy could respond. It wasn't glorious warfare, but it was effective. Every supply ship destroyed meant fewer weapons and less food for hegemony forces. Admiral Chen had the most dangerous mission of all. He was taking 4 ships straight to the hegemony capital, intending to attack the heart of their empire. It should have been impossible, but the admiral was counting on the fact that the hegemony had never faced an enemy willing to sacrifice everything for victory. The capital system was heavily defended, with orbital stations, patrol fleets, and ground-based weapons that could reach into space. But it was also filled with civilian traffic, government officials, and important facilities that the hegemony couldn't afford to lose. "All ships," Admiral Chen broadcast to his small fleet. "Remember what we're fighting for. Those medical personnel didn't have to come out here. They volunteered to help alien civilians they'd never met. The least we can do is get them home." Elena's rescue mission began with deception. Her ships pretended to be damaged hegemony vessels, broadcasting false distress signals and moving slowly toward the prison fleet. It was a dangerous game, because if the aliens figured out the trick too early, her people would be caught in the open with nowhere to run. The plan worked better than she had hoped. The hegemony ships actually moved closer to offer assistance, bringing Elena's force well within the defensive perimeter before anyone realized what was happening. "Now!" Elena shouted. The human ships dropped their disguises and opened fire at point-blank range. Railgun rounds tore through hegemony hulls and nuclear missiles detonated inside enemy formations. In the first 10 seconds, Elena's force destroyed 8 enemy ships and crippled a dozen more. But the real target was the prison transport. Elena's Marines, led by Colonel Wright, launched themselves from the Beijing in assault pods that punched through the alien ship's hull like bullets through paper. What followed was the kind of close-quarters combat that humans excelled at and other species feared. The hegemony guards had never fought humans in confined spaces before. They were used to enemies who fought at long range with energy weapons. They weren't prepared for humans with projectile guns and melee weapons who treated pain as a motivator instead of an obstacle. Colonel Wright led the assault personally, moving through the alien ship's corridors like a force of nature. His troops followed behind him, clearing rooms and rescuing prisoners with ruthless efficiency. The hegemony crew tried to fight back, but they were outmatched in every way that mattered. "Target secured," Wright reported over the comm system. "All 20 medical personnel recovered. They're hurt but alive." Elena felt a surge of relief, but she knew they weren't safe yet. The rest of the hegemony fleet was closing in, and her small force was trapped in the middle of 300 enemy ships. "All ships, emergency jump to hyperspace," she ordered. "Get our people out of here." The rescue had taken less than an hour, but it sent a message that echoed across the galaxy. Humans didn't abandon their own, no matter what the cost. They would fight impossible odds and face certain death to save even a handful of their people. On the other side of hegemony space, Captain Morrison's raids were having a different kind of effect. Supply ships were afraid to travel without heavy escorts. Manufacturing facilities were shutting down production to improve their defenses. The hegemony war machine was grinding to a halt as resources were diverted to protect infrastructure instead of supporting military operations. But it was Admiral Chen's attack on the capital that really shook the hegemony leadership. His 4 ships appeared in the heart of their most defended system and immediately began broadcasting a message that chilled alien blood across the galaxy. "This is Admiral Chen of the Human Colonial Defense Force," the transmission said. "You have committed genocide against the Zephyrian people. You have tortured human medical personnel. You have declared war on the concept of mercy itself." The Admiral's ships moved through the capital system like sharks, destroying military targets with surgical precision, while carefully avoiding civilian casualties. It was a demonstration of power that was more terrifying than simple destruction would have been. "We could destroy your worlds," the message continued. "We could reduce your cities to ash and your people to memory. But we won't, because unlike you, we have principles. Instead, we offer you a choice." The 4 human ships took up positions around the main government station, their weapons trained on the center of hegemony power. "Surrender now and face trial for your crimes. Continue this war and face extinction. You have 24 hours to decide." High Admiral Korth sat in her command center, watching the human ships hold her capital system hostage with impossible ease. 4 vessels against her entire home fleet, and somehow they had gotten through all her defenses to threaten the government directly. "How many ships do we have available?" she asked her staff. "In this system? 200? In the entire empire?" Her aide consulted his datapad. "About 4,000 scattered across our territory." Korth nodded. The numbers should have been reassuring, but they weren't. The humans had consistently defeated forces 10 to 20 times their size, and now they had demonstrated that they could strike at the heart of the hegemony whenever they chose. "What are our options?" she asked. "We could attack," her tactical officer suggested. 200 ships against 4 should be an easy victory." "Should be," Korth agreed. "But these are humans. They don't fight like other species. They'll probably ram their ships into our government station just to make a point." She was right. Admiral Chen had positioned his ships so that if they were destroyed, their wreckage would devastate the orbital facilities where the hegemony leadership lived and worked. It was a threat that no civilized species would make, and no sane commander would carry out. But humans weren't civilized, and Admiral Chen had stopped being sane the moment he saw the footage of tortured medical personnel. "There is another option," her intelligence officer said quietly. "What?" "We could surrender." The words hung in the air like a poison cloud. The hegemony had never surrendered to anyone. They were the conquerors, the masters of the galaxy, the species that other aliens feared in the darkness. But they had never fought humans before. Korth looked at the tactical display one more time. 4 human ships holding an entire star system hostage. It should have been impossible, but there they were, proving that humans didn't care about impossible. "Send a message to all hegemony forces," she said finally. "Cease all offensive operations, withdraw to defensive positions, and prepare a surrender document." Her staff stared at her in shock, but Korth had seen the tactical reports. She had watched the battle recordings. She understood what the rest of her people didn't yet realize. They had awakened something that they couldn't control. They had picked a fight with a species that would rather die than lose, that would sacrifice everything to protect the innocent, that would cross the galaxy to answer a cry for help. They had made enemies of the humans, and that was a mistake. No empire could survive. 6 months later, Ambassador Sarah Chen, the Admiral's sister, stood before the Galactic Council for the first time. The Great Hall was filled with representatives from 100 different species, all of them watching the human delegation with a mixture of fear and respect. "The hegemony has agreed to our terms," she announced. "Their military has been disbanded. Their leaders will stand trial for genocide. Their territory will be governed by a coalition of the species they conquered until stable governments can be established." The council chamber was silent. What the humans had accomplished should have been impossible. They had defeated an empire with 12 ships and 50,000 people,